My name is Craig Kopp. I'm the news director and afternoon drive host on WNKU these days. But 31 years ago, I was the news director of WEBN. I bring you some greetings tonight. Another person who's going to speak tonight, Tom Brown. I did an interview with him 2 days ago. It aired today, and I got a lot of phone calls. It aired twice this morning, and I was not there, and they talked to the person who was on the air then. And a couple of those people called me in the afternoon who had been there and had vivid memories of that night, and they wanted me to make sure that you knew that they were here in spirit and that they support this effort. And I got a call from L.A. The guy was not listening to me on the radio. He's been in L.A. for 30 years. Some people may remember this name. He ran National Medic, which was the emergency services hired by the Coliseum that night. He went through a difficult time after that, being accused of a number of things, including not being prepared for something like this. I don't know who was. Guy Nino is his name. He's been in LA for 30 years. He's in another business now. But he wanted to make sure that I also mentioned him, and that I told him it was at 8 o'clock tonight. He said that'll be 5 o'clock my time. And he said he'll be thinking about everybody here and this effort. So I bring those greetings. In the fall of 1990, I got to take my father, who's gone now, to the World Series and the playoff games. Huge baseball fan, never been. And after we were leaving the first playoff game against Pittsburgh, we had lost. It was not any sign of what was to come, thank goodness. We were walking across Fort Washington Way on that walkway and kind of discussing the game. And we're moving along, and then all of a sudden we weren't, and people got closer and closer, and people have to go down stairways at the end of that. And that crowd of people, we weren't moving. And all of a sudden I got this flash that this was what it felt like that night outside Riverfront Coliseum. Too many people trying to go through too small a spot, in the case of what happened 31 years ago, nowhere to go. I was not at this show 31 years ago. I actually had a case of the flu and was home. WEBN was a sponsor of the concert, which in real terms means they get tickets to give away, and that's pretty much it. The flu symptoms I thought were going to keep me out of work that next day disappeared when I got a call from Frank Wood, who was the general manager of WEBN. I could hear the Who in the background. He was in the Beehive Club. And he told me something terrible had happened outside. He said there were people dead and that I better get to the station. For a minute there, I thought he was kind of joking around with me, and then all of a sudden I could tell just from the tone of his voice that he wasn't, so I immediately made a call to my partner, Rick Bird, and told him to go down to the Coliseum, and I went to the radio station. I don't really remember the drive to the station. I lived in Oakley at the time. The station was in Hyde Park. I'm sure I tried to tune into other radio stations. Back then, there were several radio stations who had news departments, unlike today, to try to pick up on details, but I don't remember anything about it. I got to the station. The story had already hit the AP wires. And I think memory's not real good because it was a wild night. But I think it said first 3 dead, and the numbers kept climbing. Rick called from a payphone at the Coliseum. He said word was that there were 11 dead. And then he described where he was. He was at a payphone, standing in the middle of a pile of shoes that had been stripped off of people in whatever happened outside the Coliseum. You've seen the picture. I've been told that those had been swept into a pile from what was essentially, I think Tom Brown called it a debris field on the plaza level of clothing. Just one example of the force of something that still is hard to wrap your mind around. As Rick began telling me that, I got another call. I stopped Rick for a minute. I picked up the call. It was NBC News in New York. We'd been doing some work with them on a youth network. They wanted to know what was going on. I said I had Rick down at the Coliseum. I'll conference call you. Rick couldn't hear their questions from New York because the band was playing. So I relayed the questions, and we started the coverage of something that I've essentially been covering ever since. Even early in that story, the information that Rick was telling me indicated that there was something happened here that was hard to explain. I will have to tell you that I know now that the word that should never be associated with this event is a stampede. But I will tell you, I used that word that night, and at least a day or two after, because it was the only thing that there were reports coming in that people had injuries consistent with being stepped on and those sorts of things, and festival seating was involved, and I wasn't there, and Rick wasn't there, and none of the media was there, and so we kept using that word. But I started getting phone calls from all over the world talking about the riot, these out-of-control rock and roll fans, and I mean phone calls from everywhere. I have somewhere, if WEBN had any sense to keep it, is a script that we wrote for that night. And at the end of a story, when someone calls, you use their call letters, forward, W, whatever. And it just had a seemingly endless list of call letters, including a couple of stations in Australia and a couple in Britain and a bunch of places in Canada. All of them focused on what they thought was some kind of a riot outside where 11 people were killed. I will say that we quelched that idea, and it did take a while to rid the word stampede out of our stories. But even that night at the news conference that was held at the police station, and in a conversation we had with the mayor at the time, it was clear that a crowd had become some sort of entity that was evil, and it took everybody that was a part of it wherever it wanted to. It's still spooky when I say it. I still can't get my mind wrapped around it. There's a picture on the website, or the Facebook page you have, of Chet Flippo's article on the cover of Rolling Stone. I talked with Chet Flippo for at least an hour and a half one night, months after, trying to get it through his head and trying to explain that there were no doors open, people behind didn't know, they kept moving forward, and it became literally strong enough to bend that little cow rail at the door to the Coliseum all the way over to the ground. I went up there and looked at that so many times because they didn't repair it for a while because there were, as you well know, lawsuits and that sort of thing. But the power of it all still astounds me, and it's still one of the spookiest things ever. As the story continued to unfold over several days, I went in pursuit of the guys who drew everybody to the Coliseum. I wanted to talk to the Who. They were playing Philadelphia a week later. I had a friend who was working at WMMR radio in Philadelphia at the time. He got an interview. I tagged along. At the time, WEBN was a family-owned radio station, and the old man who owned it flew me in his plane to Philadelphia. We made a very rapid descent because there was a jet behind us, and the rapid change in pressure made my hearing go out. But I will tell you that in the elevator ride up to Roger Daltrey's room, my hearing miraculously came back. When I left Roger Daltrey's room, I couldn't hear anymore again. In talking to Roger Daltrey, a week after this happened, there was one thing that was absolutely stunningly clear. He was really, really bothered by the fact that they did that show and didn't know. They didn't know. I had a call from a guy today. He said, I took a bunch of teenagers to that show. I somehow got them out of the mess that was happening there, got into the show. They were in a box. The Who was playing.